This is a video that deals with Act 3, Scene 2 from Macbeth in detail. This is one of the scenes involving basically just the two Macbeths. So it's kind of one of the touchstones for how their relationship is developing. If we think about what we saw in Act 1, Scene 5 when we first saw them together, if we think about Act 1, Scene 7 when we saw the persuasion, shall we say, of Lady Macbeth over Macbeth, turning his ideas around about whether to kill the king or not. And of course we think about Act 2, Scene 2, the scene after the murder of Duncan. Each one of those purely focused on the relationship between them. Well, after this one, the only time we'll see the two of them together in that situation again is a brief scene at the end of Act 3, Scene 4, the Banquo Ghost scene. And then Lady Macbeth will disappear and only appear again in her sleepwalking scene on her own in Act 5, Scene 1. So this is a very important scene in terms of seeing how things are developed, and the focus, I think, really is on how the dynamic between them appears to have changed. Up until this point, I think we would say that Lady Macbeth has had an element of control, if not the idea that she's had basically the main element of control between the two of them. I wouldn't go as far as total control, but here we could argue that her control, her influence maybe, is fading. Now we're going to look through this by looking at three key moments in the scene. Now it's a short scene, so it covers actually most of the scene. Key moments that could potentially come up if you were asked a question about this. Now, I find generally that these are the main events, just to get you clear on what happens here. First of all, it starts with Lady Macbeth with a servant, and she asks the servant to call for her husband. She wants to speak to him. When the servant leaves, we get about 3 and a bit lines of Lady Macbeth speaking on her own, like a mini soliloquy, in which she reveals she's not content as queen, not content with what they've achieved. When Macbeth comes in, she's not as, should we say, not as honest with him as she is on her own with us. And instead focus on asking why he's spending so much time alone, which again I suppose reveals to us how he is as a king at the moment. His response is to talk about his worries, that they haven't achieved what they need to, and there's things they need to do, and to talk at the same time about the nightmares that he is suffering. Now then we fall into this pattern that is similar, certainly to Act 3, Scene 4, and has some similarity to Act 2, Scene 2, except that she has far less influence, as we said, where she's trying to refocus him all the time. But the interesting thing is he doesn't really seem to listen to her most of the time. Instead, he repeatedly hints at the threat he feels Banquo poses to him. But although he hints at it, he won't tell her what he's actually going to do. It's kind of pretty obvious, and I think she probably works it out. But he's never clear and refuses to be clear. It finishes with Macbeth continuing to call on the darkness to aid him in what's about to happen. Well, and we'll look at this in one of the scenes. Lady Macbeth apparently, even though she doesn't say it, seems concerned. So you can see where that dynamic is working at this point. It's similar to before, but it's not. It's the same roles in some ways, but the actual influence and the impact and how it's working is changing. So we take the big issues that we talked about in every one of these videos, Macbeth and Lady Macbeth as characters and their relationship, but also the supernatural, ambition and loyalty, gender, particular masculinity and kingship. I would argue that in this case, Macbeth is a focus. Lady Macbeth, less so, because she's not in it as much. Her role in this tends to reflect on their relationship, although it's a good scene to use if you are talking about her potentially, just to be aware of. The supernatural, I think, comes into this because it's still important to look at Macbeth's many references to them as we go here. Although we touch on ambition in terms of the reaction the response, the feelings about what they've achieved so far. It's not central to it, and neither appears to be gender. There's elements from which we can see what kind of king Macbeth is, but I wouldn't say it's central. Start at the beginning with this key moment, starting with Lady Macbeth's brief soliloquy here. Before Macbeth enters, she speaks to him and he responds with her brief soliloquy at the beginning here. Every word is key here. Nothing's had, all is spent. We've gained nothing, but we've spent everything. And that alone is a line that you think, could be used a huge amount in terms of discussing the disappointment. When you think what they've gone through to get here, if that's how they feel at this point, how she feels at this point. And she clarifies that with the line, the reason nothing's had all is spent is, or where nothing's had all is spent, is the fact that they have got their desire to become king, but they are not content. Now, what content means here is something to consider. Is it a reference to being happy, content, as we might say, relaxed and happy with what's there? Is it a sense of not being able to rest and not being able to enjoy it? Whichever way it is, she isn't content, and that's quite clear. And she clarifies that by saying something that Macbeth will echo in a minute: safer to be that which we destroy than by destruction to dwell in doubtful joy. And that oxymoron of doubtful joy is a very, very interesting phrase to focus on. If you're trying to consider either where their ambitions have taken them, where Lady Macbeth is, or more probably where their relationship is, that oxymoron really helps. Doubtful joy. Joy in what they've achieved, doubtful in terms of the fact that they appear to be full of doubt and suspicions, and quite apprehensive about what's happening. Yet when Macbeth, her mood changes slightly. She isn't open with him. She doesn't share that idea. In fact, she almost seems to say the opposite. She tries to reassure him and suggest things that she clearly is worrying about herself. When she says things without all remedy should be without regard, I suppose it's back to that practical side of her that we've seen. If you can't do anything about something, don't think about it. Although you could argue it seems that she is. As she says, what's done is done. Now, that line alone, that short phrase alone, is interesting because much later in the play, of course, when we see her in her final scene, her sleepwalking scene, one of her last words is, what's done cannot be undone. So she revisits this idea, although seemingly attached in that case to the death of Duncan. So what really am I saying here? Things without all remedy should be without regard is a practical response, right, that seems to fit what we've seen of Lady Macbeth before. But here's the interesting thing. In this case, we're given evidence above it that kind of suggests that what she's saying to Macbeth may not be exactly what she feels. Does that mean we can doubt to a degree what she says in Act 2, Scene 2? Does that mean when we see in Act 5, Scene 1, in her sleepwalking, her revealing what's inside her brain? Remember, that's what the sleepwalking device is. It's a chance to deliver what could be a soliloquy, but with others hearing. When she does that and she moves between those kind of practical, strong responses and the slight worries and concerns and fear of the blood and the guilt, does that mean she's already in that place, but she's better at hiding it? Whatever, this opening section establishes the way that their relationship is not necessarily as honest as we think. We saw this earlier in the play with Macbeth and his soliloquy, where he lists all his reasons why he shouldn't kill the king, and then gives Lady Macbeth a completely different reason, as though he's not ready to tell her the truth. But also, is it just affectionate? Is it, again, this that she carries on to do throughout this scene, where she's just trying to refocus him, get him to focus in? Is that her role? She's aware of his fragilities and she's trying to bring him in. Well, Macbeth responds, and not for the first time, with a response that suggests he's barely listening to her. He uses this image of, we have scorched the snake. In some versions it's scotched, same kind of thing, not killed it. The idea of, the snake coming towards you to attack, and you're using fire to push it away. It works, but it will come back again. Okay, it will repair itself, something they, I think, believe that snakes could do. It will repair itself, and we will remain in danger of her former tooth. So he's focusing on that idea that there is more to be done. But I also find it interesting, he's using the image here of the snake as the enemy to them. And he uses this with Macbeth, with Banquo, again, later on when Banquo's being killed, referring to him as the snake and Fleance as the worm. Now, considering earlier on it started with the image of them as the serpent, or him as the serpent, that Lady Macbeth set up for him, being the serpent underneath the innocent flower. It's almost as though he has shifted the idea of the evil being the danger to him at this point. You can do a lot with that snake image. I think it's worth considering. We move on further with this. He reveals he's having terrible dreams nightly, so we see that the impact of the supernatural is not disappearing. Might connect that, of course, to his responses in Act 2, Scene 2, where either he's hearing voices or potentially the supernatural are taunting him at that point. But he comes to a similar conclusion to Lady Macbeth's earlier. It's better to be with the dead than on the torture of the mind to lie in restless ecstasy. Better to be dead, basically, than to suffer what he's dealing with now. And again, restless ecstasy, another, if not an actual oxymoron, certainly oxymoronic in its idea, because I suppose ecstasy can make you restless, but it's the sense of the balance between joy and that sense of doubt and fear at the same time. So I would say he's saying virtually the same thing as Lady Macbeth above, yet of course she's trying to reassure and trying to suggest that that's not how it should be felt, how they should be feeling. He carries on to the idea that Duncan actually is somebody he could envy. And the reason is because he sleeps well. Come back to that idea of sleep and the interference of sleep. That sleep is content. And the fact he sleeps because he's dead means he's to be envied. The treason against him has done his worst, as if he's fearing treason himself. Nothing can touch him further. So, Macbeth's state of mind at this point is quite interesting to me. I think when we look at it, what we're seeing is someone who is tortured, that word that's in there, tortured in his mind at the moment. And that seems to refer to his dreams, but it also seems to refer to his concerns and worries. So the two of them seem to be paired up alongside each other. The terrible dreams shaking him nightly, and the concern that they haven't killed the snake yet seem to be along lines. So Macbeth's position as king, which backs up the soliloquy we've just seen in the previous scene, suggests that he is struggling. Power, because, as he predicted himself, he gained it through blood. All he is doing now is worrying that the same is going to happen to him. So when you think about it overall, compare those reactions that they got to achieving their ambitions. Okay, at this point in the play, remember we're right at the peak of the play now, there's plenty to go. Look at the way they interact with each other, the way that Lady Macbeth maybe changes her approach slightly to him from when she's on her own, the way he reacts to what she's saying. And then consider the idea. Is Macbeth going as far as regret? Don't think it's completely clear. Let's look at the second key moment here. It involves one of the key lines in the play. This opening phrase here, where he tells Lady Macbeth, we must make our faces vizards to our hearts. Now, on the one hand, that is a repeated image that we've come all the way through here. The idea that goes right throughout the play of covering up your true intent. That's what the clothing imagery throughout the poem is doing. Covering up on the outside the truth on the inside. Okay? And it started with the look like the innocent flower, but be the serpent neath it. And that idea has come on various times. False face must hide what false heart doth know, Macbeth says earlier. It also is another example of Macbeth repeating something that Lady Macbeth told him earlier, or that someone else said earlier, as though it's his own idea. But remember, vizards are the face masks on helmets worn in battle at the time. So it is a sense of covering up, but also of covering up and defending. So our face is defending what's in us, takes it slightly further, possibly. Now, to look at Lady Macbeth's two reactions in this is quite interesting, because, as you can see, this is, as suggested before, her attempting to refocus him, to take him away from his worries and suggest we've just got to get on with things. Yeah, leave this behind. A similar, you must leave this similar phrase to the one she used in Act 2, Scene 2. And reassuring him when he mentions Banquo and Fleance with this line, but in them nature's copy's not etern. You know, their nature's copy, their natural flesh, their earthly flesh is not eternal. They won't live forever, in other words. So she is being practical again, coming back to this, maybe again covering over some of the suspicions she's got. But the important thing to me, look at the two lines with which he reacts to this. You got to leave this. All full of scorpions is my mind, dear wife. But in them nature's copy's not etern. There's comfort, yet they're assailable. He doesn't seem to be listening to her at all. You've got to leave this. All he repeats is how disturbed he is. With this lovely image about scorpions, his mind being full of scorpions, being stung away all the time inside him, his mind constantly stinging him inside, with the poetic ode to suggest how passionate he is about this. And then the next one almost seems to contradict it. She reassures him they won't live forever, and he appears to think he's comforting her, or himself, by saying, I can get to them. So totally ignoring her suggestion, not even coming back to her and saying, yeah, no, I think we need to get them now. I think good evidence that he's not paying any attention to what she's saying. Okay, and finally, leading up to him telling her there's going to be done a deed of dreadful note, which in a second, of course, he will refuse to say what it is, we have this list of imagery here saying basically it's going to be done before night time. But when you look at his choice here to talk about the bat flying his cloistered flight, black heckheads in summons, the shard-born beetle, night's yawning peal. Well, firstly, he's using the bat and the beetle as he used scorpions before. Again, creatures that are associated or were associated very, very much with evil. And the idea is partially to do with the blackness in the bat and the beetle of them. So again, his choice of imagery, and to use the Queen of the Witches as well, referred to as black at the same time, is very much suggesting to us that he is allying himself with the darkness still. The cloistered flight, covering up, night's yawning peal. There's plenty of interesting imagery in there to suggest where Macbeth is. So, if we think about this then overall, what we're thinking is, what's Lady Macbeth trying to achieve here? Maybe not succeeding. What's the dynamic between them at this point if Macbeth is behaving the way we feel he is and speaking? And think about the impact of that use of dark imagery at the end. The final key moment. This is the end of the scene. Lady Macbeth requests to be told what's to be done. Macbeth won't tell her. Won't tell her to begin with is interesting. First of all, the use of the phrase "dearest Chuck," first of all, shows the relationship between them, the way things are. That clearly still that love that we saw in his first line for her, you know, when he just refers to her as my dearest love, is still there. A lot of people try and suggest that they're drifting apart in terms of their feelings for each other and their love and whatever. But I think lines like this show that's not true. And you could also argue that what he's saying here by saying be instant knowledge till thou applaud the deed is that the reason he won't tell her is because he wants to impress her. He wants her to see what he can achieve. Now you could at the same time say that this is showing a little bit of naivety as to what Lady Macbeth is like, telling her to be innocent of the knowledge. If any reference to Lady Macbeth being innocent maybe kind of shows a naivety as to her role so far. It's a difficult phrase to see exactly what he's trying to do, but whatever it is, he's saying, I'm not going to tell you what I'm going to do. However, he has just said that Banquo is going to be assailable. He's just said a deed of dreadful note is about to come up, and he's just telling her, about to say, how he wants again night to come and take over him. So it's not exactly like he's hiding what's going to happen. It's a complex thing to interpret. Then, yes, he does go on immediately afterwards to that image that we've seen repeatedly throughout the play, when he said, stars hide your fires, come not to see my black and deep desires, when Lady Macbeth earlier on said, come thick night and pour thee in the dunning smoke of hell. And it worked. We saw that Banquo noted that the stars had all gone out. Again, Macbeth, ahead of what's to happen here, calls on the night to but this is not to go to him, it is to scarf up the tender eye of pitiful day. He's more calling on night now to take control over day, evil to take control over good, what he sees as pitiful good, a tender eye. And again, very much scarfing up the eye, don't let it see it, come and stop it from seeing the bad, the nastiness that we're going to do. What it's going to lead into is the idea of tearing apart that great bond which keeps him pale, which seems to be a reference to the witch's prophecy about Banquo's children. He carries on by, just as before, going into a list of very, very dark imagery here, talking particularly about the approach of night here. Light thickens, and the crow makes wing to the rooky wood. The crow flying to the wood that's full of rooks. I mean, absolutely packed with these birds of ill omen, birds of death here. The good things of day begin to droop and drowse. It's interesting, he talks about them being good. Night's black agents are coming up to get their praise. It's almost really a statement that this is just what happens and what's going to happen. But the way he speaks almost seems to suggest there's a sense of joy about this. So are we looking at Macbeth still being very aligned to the darkness and excited about what he's going to achieve here? That would certainly go with his reaction in a minute when we see him being told it's successful. Or are we seeing the continued influence of the supernatural over him as in his obsession with darkness? Finally in the scene comes to this key phrase, thou marvellest at my words. Now if you think about that, he's clearly turning to Lady Macbeth, and just as she in their first meeting in the play turned to him and said, your face is like a book where I can read strange matters, you know, I can read exactly what you're thinking and it's strange. Here he is responding clearly to her facial expressions. She is marvelling at what he's going to say, or what he's saying. Now, if we think about that, it opens up an idea for us about what she thinks of him and his idea at this point. I mean, let's say that she doesn't know exactly what's going to be done, but she clearly must have realised it's something to do with Banquo. She doesn't appear to be comfortable with it. She appears to be disturbed at best at what he's saying, possibly worried at worst. And I think this is very interesting evidence that potentially Lady Macbeth is not happy with the idea of killing Banquo, doesn't feel it necessary or the right thing to do, and adds to the potential interpretation that's come up in other scenes that Lady Macbeth could be argued that a lot of what she does involving Duncan shows, first of all, her attempting to overcome the restrictions of her gender to achieve whatever she can. And maybe even, and some have played on this in interpretations of the play, maybe even suggests a slight bitterness towards Duncan himself. She doesn't go along with where he's going now, but he still continues. So consider yourself, why won't he tell her? We talked about the fact there's a lot of potential interpretations. Is he completely in control of himself at this point? And when we look at that apparent reaction of Lady Macbeth, think about what that's suggesting about the difference in where they are at this point. Okay, so if we take the scene as a whole, we take those three areas we mentioned. As I said, you can bring in other ones as well, but let's deal with Macbeth as a person here, because he dominates this scene, which is also a reflection of the dynamic in general. What do his worries and action reveal about where he is in his mind at this point in the play? That's something that I think is worth considering. I think we get as much from this scene as we do from the soliloquy in the previous scene. Consider their relationship. Consider what the dynamic between them actually is at this point. I don't think it's as simple as people sometimes make out. Then consider the supernatural. There's constant references to them here. So where is the relationship between the two of them at this point? What influence is the supernatural having on him? How does Macbeth feel in his alignment to the supernatural? We take it into the rest of the play, bearing in mind that we are around about halfway through the play at this point, round about in the centre of the play. We'd ask ourselves, is Macbeth any more in control of himself and his actions than he has been previously, and than he will be in the future as well? Where is his level of control compared to the rest of the play? I think particularly with the relationship, as we said, we're coming to the end of seeing the two of them together. How is it changing from the first two acts? And you might even ask yourself the question, why is it changing from the first two acts? And then with the supernatural, are we seeing a change in the impact of the supernatural events? Now, we are kind of between the two big interactions of Macbeth with the supernatural, between the witches meeting him earlier in the play and him going to the witches later. And as we observe with those scenes, it's interesting that even though he's king, for the second time, he is the one pursuing the witches, and in that scene they are quite dismissive of him and seem to take far more control over him. Is this further examples of a kind of a change in the level of impact they are having because of what Macbeth has done? A key scene.